I still remember the weight of the key in my hand that night, cold, familiar, comforting. But when I slipped it into the front door of the house my grandmother left me, it jammed. I tried again, harder this time, but the lock wouldn't turn. Through the frosted glass, I saw warm light flickering inside. Someone was home. I pressed my face closer and froze. My parents were sitting on my sofa, laughing with my older brother and his wife like they owned the place. Boxes with his name were stacked neatly by the stairs. A welcome home banner hung across the living room I grew up in. Before I could even process the betrayal, the door opened from the inside, not by my parents, but by my brother, who stared at me like I was trespassing. "Why are you here, Ainsley? Didn't Mom tell you?" "No, no one told me anything. If this was your home and your family did this to you, what would you do?" My heartbeat thudded in my ears as I stood in the doorway, suitcase still in hand, night air creeping up my back. Derek didn't move aside. He just stood there, tall and smug, his arm resting against the frame like some gatekeeper. For a split second, I wondered if this was a prank, a sick one. "Move," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. He didn't. Behind him, I heard Mom's familiar voice, soft but strained. "Ainsley, honey, you're back earlier than we thought." She walked toward me, smiling nervously, her eyes darting between me and Derek. Dad appeared in the hallway too, arms crossed, silent as a statue. I rolled my suitcase past Derek's foot, forcing my way in. "What's going on?" I asked. My voice echoed through the house I'd always considered mine. The smell hit me next, fresh paint, lemon cleaner, something floral. The house looked different. The worn-out curtains Grandma had hung were gone. The walls had been repainted a sterile eggshell white. A brand new rug covered the wooden floors, and then the boxes. Dozens of them labeled Derek's office, master bedroom, kitchen fragile. My stomach twisted. "I leave for 3 weeks and suddenly my house turns into a frat move-in?" I said. Derek smirked. "It's not sudden, we've been planning this for months." Mom rushed to him, placing a hand on his arm like she was trying to contain a fire. "Derek, please," then she turned to me. "Sweetheart, we were going to talk to you." "When?" "Cut her off." "Before or after you changed the locks?" Her face fell. Dad still hadn't said a word. His silence was worse than anything. It meant he agreed. I walked into the living room slowly, scanning every changed detail like an investigator at a crime scene. The banner above the mantel, the flowers on the table, the way Marissa's shoes sat neatly on the mat by the door. She peeked out from the kitchen, her blonde hair tied in a messy bun, holding a wine glass. "Oh," she said awkwardly. "You're back." "Yeah," I snapped. "I live here." No one replied. I turned to Mom. "What's happening?" She exhaled deeply, like she'd been rehearsing this conversation. "Ainsley, things have shifted. Your brother and Marissa need a stable place, and since you're always traveling for work, we thought it would make sense for them to settle here and help manage the house." "Manage?" I repeated, incredulous. "This is my house. Grandma left it to me." Mom looked down at her hands. "She left it to all of us in spirit." "No. Legally, she left it to me." Derek cut in. "Don't make this difficult, Ainsley. You barely even live here anymore. It makes sense for someone responsible to take care of it." Responsible. He actually said that. Derek, the same brother who once got evicted from 2 apartments in a row for throwing illegal parties, was now responsible. I laughed, but it came out sharp, bitter. Unbelievable. Dad finally spoke, his deep voice echoing through the living room. "Enough. We've discussed this as a family." "It's decided. Discuss this as a family." A family that somehow didn't include me. I felt my chest tight. "You can't just decide to take over someone's property behind their back. That's illegal." Mom stepped forward, reaching for my hand. "Sweetheart, don't make this harder than it needs to be." I pulled my hand back. "Harder for who? You or me?" The room grew quiet. Even Marissa lowered her wine glass. I knew in that moment that something deeper was happening here. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This was a move, calculated and deliberate, and I wasn't going to let it slide. Derek walked over to the fireplace like he owned the place, his hands in his pockets, surveying the room with this smug look that made my blood boil. "Here's the deal," he started in that smooth, patronizing tone he always used when he thought he was smarter than everyone else. "Mom and Dad agreed that I'll be taking over the house. You know, maintenance, renovations, all that adult stuff. Since you're always gone, someone has to actually be here to manage things." I stared at him. "Manage things? Derek, you couldn't even manage your own credit card bills." Marissa shifted uncomfortably, pretending to polish her wine glass. Mom quickly stepped in, hands raised like she was breaking up a fight. "He didn't mean it like that. We just think it's practical." "No," I said. "What you think is that you can make decisions behind my back and I'll just nod along like always." "That's not happening." Dad's voice cut through the room again. "Enough, Ainsley, you're making a scene." "A scene?" I snapped. Someone changed the locks on my house and you're calling me dramatic? Derek rolled his eyes and leaned back against the mantel. Honestly, Ainsley, you're overreacting. This place is falling apart. The roof leaks, the foundation's cracking, the taxes are overdue, Mom and Dad can't keep up with it. I'm stepping in to help. You should be grateful. I wanted to scream. Instead, I turned on my heel and stormed up the stairs. My old bedroom door was locked. A silver key dangled from Derek's keychain, swinging slightly as he followed me. Looking for this? He said, dangling it in front of my face. Give it back, I demanded. He tucked it into his pocket. Sorry, that's Marissa's room now. It felt like the air had been punched out of my lungs. Marissa's room, the room where I used to tape stars to the ceiling, where Grandma tucked me in when I had nightmares. Now it belonged to my brother's wife, a woman I barely tolerated at family dinners. I stepped back, clutching the railing to keep my hands from shaking. You can't just— I already did, Derek interrupted. We moved their stuff in last week. You should have answered your phone. I clenched my jaw. My phone wasn't off, nobody called me. He shrugged. Not my problem. Downstairs, Mom called up, Ainsley, come down for dinner. Let's talk this out calmly. I didn't want dinner, I wanted answers. But I went down anyway because I needed to keep my head clear. Dinner was a nightmare. We sat around Grandma's old oak table, the same one where she used to serve roast chicken every Sunday. Now, it felt like enemy territory. They talked about paint swatches, new furniture, tearing down walls, like I wasn't even there. Marissa pulled out a stack of design magazines and laid them across the table. I was thinking of opening this wall here to make it more open concept, she said, pointing to the sketch. My fork clinked against my plate. That's a load-bearing wall, Marissa, she blinked. Oh, Derek chuckled. Good thing I'm in charge now, right? My grip tightened on my fork. This is insane. Mom reached across the table. Ainsley, please don't ruin dinner. I'm not ruining dinner, you all are ruining my life. Silence. The kind that sinks into your bones. Dad finally said, you're being unreasonable. No, I whispered. I'm the only reasonable one here. I excused myself before I exploded. Upstairs, I opened the safe in my closet. Inside were Grandma's documents, neatly filed in a manila folder. I pulled them out and flipped through them. Deed, property tax receipts, insurance papers, all still under my name. My heart slowed a little. But then, tucked behind the deed, I found something new. A crisp, official-looking document, temporary transfer of management rights. It had my name on it, and a signature that looked like mine. My hands went cold. I stared at the curling loops of the signature, so close, so precise, but it wasn't mine. I'd never seen this document before. Someone in my family had forged my signature. I sat on the floor of my old room, back against the wall, papers spread around me like a storm. Downstairs, I could hear laughter and clinking dishes. They were celebrating. I was plotting. The next morning, I came downstairs early, still in my hoodie, clutching the forged document in my hand like a piece of evidence. The house was quiet, sunlight cutting through the kitchen blinds in long, pale lines. Mom walked in, already dressed like she was about to head to some charity brunch. She gave me a tight smile. Good morning, sweetheart. I held up the paper. Care to explain this? She froze mid-step. For a brief second, guilt flashed across her face, then it was gone, replaced by that practiced calm I'd seen her use in every uncomfortable family situation. Oh, that, she said softly. It's just a temporary arrangement. Derek and Marissa are going to help us take care of the house while you're busy with work. By forging my signature, I snapped. She lowered her voice. Don't be dramatic. Your father signed off on it too. We were going to talk to you. When, after you sold the house? She frowned. Nobody's selling anything. You're blowing this out of proportion. Derek is family. We're all family. Family doesn't do this behind someone's back, I said, my voice shaking with anger. She sighed heavily like I was the one exhausting her. Ainsley, listen, it's not forever. Just while we sort some things out, it would really help if you temporarily stayed somewhere else, just for a few weeks while the renovations happen. I stared at her. You want me to leave my own house? She didn't meet my eyes. It would be easier for everyone. At that moment, I heard footsteps behind me. Derek strolled in, yawning dramatically like a king waking up in his palace. Morning, he said, pouring himself coffee. Has she agreed yet? My jaw clenched. Agreed to what? To move out temporarily, he replied. You're always on the road anyway. Think of it like a sabbatical. We'll get the house in shape, pay off the debts, and you can just waltz back in when it's all done. He said it like he was doing me a favor. No, I said simply. He turned, mug in hand. What? I'm not leaving, I said. This is my house, I'm staying. The air in the room changed. Derek's smile disappeared. That afternoon, a silver SUV pulled into the driveway. A tall woman in a beige blazer stepped out, holding a clipboard. Hi, she said cheerfully as she approached the door. I'm Becca from Keller and Lang Realty. I'm here to take a quick look at the property before we list it. I blinked. Before you what? She looked confused. The house, for sale. Derek scheduled this appointment. I turned slowly toward Derek, who was lounging on the couch, scrolling through his phone. You did what? I said. He didn't even look up. It's just exploratory, chill out. Exploratory? I hissed. You don't have the right to do anything with this property. Becca looked between us nervously. Should I come back later? Yes, I said firmly. Or never. She backed away. I grabbed Derek's phone out of his hand. You're scheduling showings? Are you insane? He snatched it back. I'm being proactive. The house is underwater. Mom and Dad are drowning in debt. Someone has to fix this mess. You clearly won't. By selling the house out from under me, his face hardened. It's not just about you, Ainsley. Stop acting like it is. I locked myself in the study and called our old family lawyer, Mr. Keller. He handled Grandma's estate years ago and knew the house inside out. When I told him about the forged document, there was a long pause on the line. That's serious, he finally said. You need to secure all the original documents immediately. Make copies, digital and physical. Do not let them out of your possession. They haven't filed anything with the county yet, he added, but if they do, undoing it gets messy. And if Derek's already talking to realtors, you need to move fast. I stared at the piles of paperwork spread across the desk. What are my options? 2 paths, he said. 1, try to mediate. But from the sound of it, that ship has sailed. 2, stand your ground legally and prepare to challenge any forged or unauthorized documents in court. That means staying in the house, documenting everything, and not giving them an inch. I took a deep breath. Then I guess I'm staying. Good, he said, but be ready. This is going to get ugly. That night, I changed the alarm codes, installed a temporary deadbolt on my bedroom door, and moved all the legal papers into a locked safe. Downstairs, I could hear Derek arguing with Mom about the realtor. Dad's voice rumbled low, like a storm brewing. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a battlefield. I stood by the window, looking out at the dark yard, Grandma's rose bushes swaying gently in the wind. I remembered her voice, steady and warm. This house is yours, sweetheart. Don't let anyone take it from you. I whispered into the glass, I won't. The next morning, I woke up to the smell of bacon and coffee. For a split second, I forgot everything and thought it was one of those quiet mornings with Grandma, me in pajamas, her humming old country songs while flipping pancakes. Then I heard Derek's voice. Loud, confident, too comfortable. Yeah, man, the place is huge. We're probably gonna knock out the back wall and build a deck. Finally, some real space, he said into his phone. I walked downstairs slowly, every creak of the steps sharpening my anger. He was sitting at the kitchen island, barefoot, coffee in hand, talking like he'd already owned the place for years. When he noticed me, he grinned. Morning, landlord. I ignored him and went straight for the coffee pot. Mom was at the sink, scrubbing dishes a little too aggressively. Dad sat at the table reading the paper, pretending nothing was wrong. Are we really doing this? I said. Mom sighed. Ainsley. No, I want a straight answer. I cut her off. Are you actually supporting this? Dad lowered the newspaper but didn't meet my eyes. Your brother, just trying to help. The house is in trouble. Then talk to me, I said, slamming my mug down. It's my house. You had every chance to pick up the phone. Mom turned around, her voice rising. You're never here, you travel constantly, you keep everything to yourself, and when we finally take initiative, you show up and act like we betrayed you. I stared at her. Because you did. Silence fell like a heavy curtain. She opened her mouth, closed it, then whispered, You're being selfish. That word hit me harder than I expected. Selfish. After everything I'd done for this family, I thought of all the years I sent money home to help with repairs, the times I canceled trips to care for Dad when he was sick, the holidays I spent alone because they needed time with Derek. I swallowed hard. No, I'm being clear. That's new for you, I know. Derek laughed under his breath. Wow, someone's dramatic today. I turned to him slowly. You've been lying to my face since I walked through that door. You forged my signature. You tried to sell my house. You stole my room, and I'm dramatic. He raised his hands in mock surrender. I didn't forge anything. Mom and Dad handled the paperwork. Don't drag us into this, Dad barked. Too late. Around noon, I noticed 2 men in work boots unloading equipment from a van parked out front. I rushed outside. Hey, what are you doing? One of them wiped his forehead. We're here to check the foundation, scheduled by a Derek Morrison. Cancel it, I said firmly. He frowned. We have a contract. No, you don't. This is my property. I didn't authorize anything. If you set 1 foot inside, I'm calling the police. The man glanced at his partner, then at Derek, who was now leaning on the porch railing, arms folded, watching the scene like it was free entertainment. "Derek," I hissed. He shrugged. "Just trying to keep the house from falling apart. You should thank me." "Get off my property," I told the workers. They packed up reluctantly. Derek muttered something under his breath as they drove off. That night, Mom knocked on my door. Her voice was soft, almost pleading. "Honey, can we talk?" I opened the door a crack. Her face was tired, lines etched deeper than I remembered. She stepped inside. "This tension isn't good for any of us. Maybe if you just gave Derek temporary control, things could settle down. He can handle the logistics while you focus on work. It doesn't have to be a fight." "It already is a fight," I said. She looked genuinely hurt. "Why are you doing this?" "Because Grandma trusted me with this house," I answered. "Not Derek, not anyone else. She trusted me." Mom's voice cracked. "We're drowning, Ainsley. You don't understand." "Then explain it to me," I said. "Tell me the truth for once." But she didn't. She just shook her head and whispered, "You'll regret this," before leaving my room. Her words echoed in the silence long after she left. Later that night, I sat by the living room window with a notebook in my lap, listing everything I needed to do: secure documents, update locks, call the lawyer again, install hidden cameras, gather financial records. This wasn't just a family argument anymore. This was a legal war. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a strange clarity settle over me. This house wasn't just walls and wood. It was my grandmother's legacy. It was the only place where I'd ever felt truly safe, and I was not going to let them take it. The following morning, I woke up earlier than usual. I couldn't sleep anyway. My mind kept replaying the sound of Mom's voice. "You'll regret this." I walked through the house slowly, room by room. Every corner had a memory. Grandma humming in the kitchen while stirring jam, me doing homework at the dining table, Derek chasing me down the hallway with a Nerf gun. Now it all felt like someone had tried to paint over those memories with cheap white paint. But underneath, they were still mine. I went to the hardware store as soon as it opened. By noon, the house had a brand new set of locks. Only I had the keys. I changed the alarm code, installed hidden cameras in the entryway and living room, and placed a motion sensor in the hallway upstairs. I even bought a big metal sign for the front yard. Private property, TRSBSSERS will be PROSSUTD petty? Maybe. Necessary? Absolutely. When Derek came home that afternoon, the first thing he noticed was the keypad blinking. "What the hell?" he said. "New code," I replied casually. He frowned. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you don't live here," I said. "Remember," his face flushed. "You can't just—" "I can," I interrupted, and I did. "From now on, any changes to this house go through me. Legal owner, full stop." Mom appeared in the doorway, alarmed. "Ainsley, what did you do?" "I secured my property," I said calmly. "Like my lawyer told me to." Derek stepped closer. "You think you can just lock us out?" I didn't flinch. "No, I know I can." For the first time, I saw something in his eyes that wasn't smugness, it was frustration. He wasn't used to me standing my ground. That evening, while they sulked in the living room, I sat at the dining table with a stack of papers spread out in front of me. Property deed, will, tax records, the forged management transfer. I scanned and uploaded everything into a cloud drive. I created backups, labeled folders, printed extra copies. If they wanted a fight, I was going to be ready. Dad came in quietly, holding his coffee like he didn't want to be part of this. "You're making this worse," he said softly. "No," I replied without looking up. "I'm just not rolling over this time." He hesitated at the doorway. "You always were the stubborn one." I looked up at him. "No, I was always the one you thought wouldn't fight back." He didn't answer, just turned and walked away. Later that night, I called Mr. Keller again. "I've secured the house," I said. "Locks, codes, documents." "Everything?" "Good," he replied. "From now on, document every interaction. Emails, texts, conversations if you can. This is no longer just a family disagreement, it's a legal matter." "I know," I said quietly. "Ainsley," he added, "this might get uglier before it gets better. They may try to intimidate you. They may say things to break you down. Don't take the bait. Keep your head clear." I promised I would. Before going to bed, I walked outside into the cool night. The sky was a deep navy, stars scattered faintly above. Grandma's rose bushes lined the front porch, their petals slightly wilted but still holding on. I knelt down and touched the soil. "I've got this, Grandma," I whispered. Standing up, I looked back at the house. This wasn't just real estate. This was the last piece of my grandmother's love, and for the first time since walking through that jammed front door, I felt steady. Lines had been drawn. They had declared war behind my back. Now I was declaring mine to their faces. For the first few weeks, the house felt like a quiet battleground. Mom stopped making small talk. Dad would barely look at me. And Derek? He acted like nothing had changed, except now, he strutted around like the self-appointed landlord of a property that wasn't his. He'd bring contractors over without telling me, walk them through the house like he owned it. I chased them off every time, but it was exhausting. I'd hear the front door open, find two strangers in the living room with measuring tapes, and Derek smirking in the background like it was a game. I started keeping a log, dates, times, names, everything. If they wanted a war, I was going to fight like a lawyer, even if I wasn't one. Social isolation came next. Mom started leaving the house early and staying out late. When she was home, she avoided me. Dad retreated into his newspaper and TV like a man hiding in a bunker. Meals were silent, tense. One night I walked into the kitchen while Mom was on the phone. She didn't see me. "She's being unreasonable," she whispered. "No, the lawyer hasn't filed anything yet, but if she keeps digging, she'll find out. I know, just trust me, we'll make it work." I froze in the doorway. She turned and jumped. "Oh, Ainsley, you scared me." I leaned against the frame. "Who were you talking to?" She forced a smile. "Just your aunt." I raised an eyebrow. Mom was many things, but a good liar wasn't one of them. "Right," I said and walked away. But inside, the alarm bells were ringing. Mr. Keller, my lawyer, became my lifeline. We spoke almost daily. "Remember," he told me, "they're going to try to make this emotional. You have to keep it legal. Gather evidence. Every forged document leaves a trail." So I dug. I went through every file Grandma had left, tax returns, insurance policies, even old letters. I made copies, scanned them into cloud storage, organized everything meticulously. And that's when I found it. A manila envelope tucked inside a box of Christmas decorations. Inside, old mortgage papers, notarized forms from when Grandma refinanced the house 15 years ago. But more importantly, a sheet of lined notebook paper covered in perfect loops and curves. My signature, over and over. It was dated 10 years ago. My stomach dropped. I remembered exactly when this was. I was 16, bored one summer afternoon, and Derek had asked me to practice signing forms so he could help me open a teen bank account. I didn't realize he had kept the sheet. He'd saved my handwriting, my signature, for years. That's how they forged the document. That's the twist. It wasn't some sophisticated digital scam. It was my brother, using something he'd tricked me into doing as a teenager. I sat on the floor of the attic staring at the paper, hands trembling. It felt like my entire childhood had been weaponized against me. I brought the paper to Mr. Keller the next day. His eyes widened. "This," he said, holding it up with tweezers like evidence from a crime scene, "is gold. This shows premeditation. They didn't just forge your signature, they had a template. This will kill their credibility in court." He suggested I take the original to a forensic document examiner. I did. 2 days later, the report confirmed what I already knew. The signature on the management transfer was a traced copy of my teenage handwriting. Legally, this was fraud. Emotionally, it was betrayal on a level I hadn't been prepared for. Meanwhile, Derek escalated his behavior. He started throwing little jabs at me in front of Mom and Dad. "Still playing house, huh? Must be nice having lawyers on speed dial when the rest of us are struggling. Maybe if you weren't so controlling, we wouldn't have to do this." He'd say it casually, like jokes, but every word was a needle. One night, he cornered me in the kitchen. "You know this won't end well for you," he said quietly. I didn't back away. "Is that a threat?" He smiled. "It's reality. Mom and Dad are on my side, the bank's breathing down their necks. You're just one person, you can't fight all of us." I met his gaze evenly. "Watch me." For a split second, the smile faltered. Then he laughed and walked away. The more I investigated, the uglier things got. Property tax notices had been redirected to my parents' address months before I even found out about the forged document. Utility bills had been switched into Derek's name without my consent. It was like they'd been slowly erasing me from my own house, one paper trail at a time. I found out they'd been collecting mail in my name too, loan offers, refinancing letters. I filed a police report just to have it on record, though I knew they wouldn't intervene until something bigger happened. Mr. Keller said, "They're setting up a narrative. Absentee owner, irresponsible, not paying attention. You need to crush that narrative with facts." So I started building my case. I compiled financial statements, proof of my payments toward repairs, even emails with Grandma about how she wanted me to keep the house. This wasn't just about proving ownership anymore. It was about proving character. But as the days passed, the emotional weight started to pile up. I'd walk into the living room and see Derek's boxes stacked against the walls, Marissa's perfume lingering in the air, my parents whispering in corners. The house that once felt like my sanctuary now felt like enemy territory. Some nights, I'd sit in Grandma's old rocking chair in the corner of the living room and stare at the family photos on the wall. There was Derek in his graduation gown, me in my first dance recital, Mom holding us both with a proud smile. It made me wonder, had they always seen me as a tool, as the responsible one to fix their messes, then step aside when they wanted the reward? I clenched my fists. No, not this time. This time, I wasn't going to be the quiet one. The next move came on a rainy Thursday afternoon. I opened the front door to find an envelope taped to it. Inside, a formal notice of intent to sell, dated and signed, not by me, of course, but by Derek and my parents. They sent it to the bank, too. It wasn't legally binding, but it was a shot across the bow. A warning, we're moving ahead without you. I stood there, rain dripping off my coat, reading the paper over and over until the ink started to smudge. They were serious. And so was I. The notice taped to my door wasn't legally binding, but it was loud and clear. They were moving forward whether I liked it or not. For a few days, the house turned into a passive-aggressive war zone. Derek would invite potential contractors over just to annoy me, then act shocked when I threw them out. Mom would sigh dramatically every time she walked past me, muttering under her breath about how I was tearing the family apart. Dad avoided me entirely, hiding behind work and silence. They thought if they made life unbearable, I'd eventually pack my bags and leave. But they underestimated just how stubborn I could be. I decided to stop reacting and start investigating. One evening, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the study with Grandma's old filing cabinet pulled open. I went through every folder slowly, methodically. Medical bills, property taxes, old insurance policies. Then, buried behind a stack of Christmas cards, I found something strange. A folder labeled MORRISON private in Dad's handwriting. Inside were overdue notices from the bank, letters stamped in red with words like final warning and delinquent. Dates stretched back over a year. My heart started pounding as I flipped through them. They had been taking out loans against the house, quietly, while I was working 2 states away. And it wasn't small amounts either. We were talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Home equity lines of credit, personal loans, refinancing attempts, all tied to the house Grandma left me. I sank back in the chair, papers spread across the desk. This was the reason, not renovations, not family planning, money, debt, desperation. The next morning, I decided to test the waters. Over breakfast, I casually said, I talked to the bank yesterday. Derek froze mid-bite. Mom's coffee cup stopped halfway to her lips. Dad lowered his newspaper slowly. Oh, Derek said carefully. And what did they say? They said they've been getting letters signed by you 3, not me, I replied, and that there's a huge outstanding balance that's about to default. Dad cleared his throat. We were going to tell you. When? I snapped. When the bank foreclosed. Mom reached out, trying to soften it. Sweetheart, it's complicated. You wouldn't understand. I laughed, bitter and sharp. Try me. Derek set his fork down. Fine, you want the truth? We've been borrowing against the house because Mom and Dad were drowning. Medical bills, mortgage payments, repairs. The bank gave us an opportunity. I took charge. Took charge? I repeated. Of my house, he leaned back. Someone had to. You were too busy living your perfect little life somewhere else. That hit a nerve, but I didn't let it show. After breakfast, Derek left for work and Mom retreated to her garden. Dad stayed behind. For the first time in weeks, it was just the 2 of us in the kitchen. He stared into his coffee for a long time before saying, We didn't mean to hurt you, Ainsley. We just didn't know what else to do. You could have told me, I said quietly. He shook his head. Your grandmother trusted you because you're responsible. If we had told you, you would have said no. I stared at him. You're right, I would have, because it's illegal. He didn't deny it. That silence was all the confirmation I needed. I called Mr. Keller that afternoon and explained what I'd found. He didn't sound surprised. Classic, he said. They use the house as collateral behind your back. It happens more than you think. Here, what you need to do, get copies of everything, every loan statement, every letter, and check the county recorder's office for any liens, quietly. So I did. I spent 2 days visiting the county office, bank branches, and a notary, and what I discovered made my stomach twist. There were 3 separate loans attached to the property, totaling nearly $250,000, all signed within the last 14 months, all using forged management transfer documents to justify Derek's authority. They weren't just playing family games anymore. This was fraud on a financial scale. That weekend, Derek threw a barbecue in the backyard. He invited his friends, Mom invited some neighbors, and Dad fired up the grill like we were still one big happy family. But the atmosphere was weird. People whispered. A few of the neighbors gave me sympathetic looks. One older woman leaned in and whispered, "Honey, are you okay? I heard they're selling the house." The rumor mill was already spinning. Derek was clearly painting himself as the savior brother rescuing the family estate from the absent, ungrateful sister. I smiled tightly. Don't believe everything you hear. Later that night, after the guests left, Derek cornered me by the fence. "Why are you digging around in things you don't understand?" he asked. "I understand just fine," I replied. "You forged documents to borrow money you can't pay back, and now the bank's about to come knocking." His eyes narrowed. "You think you can outsmart me because you have a lawyer, but you're alone in this, Ainsley. No one's on your side." I stepped closer. "Maybe, but I have the law and the truth. That's more than you've got." He let out a low laugh. "Keep telling yourself that." I spent the next few days setting traps. I installed a hidden camera in the study where most of the forged documents had been stored. I backed up every email, every scanned document, every bank statement onto multiple drives, one at home, one in a safe deposit box. I also started sending myself time-stamped emails summarizing every incident. It's an old legal trick. If the case goes to court, these become contemporaneous records that hold up as evidence. Meanwhile, Mom's behavior grew more distant. She avoided eye contact, and when she did talk to me, her words were clipped, rehearsed. Dad looked tired, like the weight of his choices was finally settling on his shoulders. But Derek, he looked like he was gearing up for war. One night, I overheard him on the phone in the backyard. "Yeah, the bank's not backing out. We just need to convince her to leave. Once she's out, it's easy. Yeah, she won't fight that hard. She's not like that." I smiled in the dark. "Oh, Derek, you have no idea who you're dealing with." Within 2 weeks, Derek changed his tactics. The quiet manipulations and whispered conversations stopped. In their place came something far more aggressive, a calculated campaign to isolate, discredit, and pressure me into surrendering. It started with the neighbors. Mrs. Halpern, who lived 2 doors down, stopped by one morning while I was watering the roses. She leaned in, lowering her voice like she was about to share state secrets. "Sweetheart," she whispered, "I heard you're losing the house. Derek said the bank's already decided. Is that true?" I felt the hose tighten in my grip. "No, it's not true. Derek doesn't speak for me or the bank." She gave me a sympathetic smile, the kind you give someone at a funeral, and patted my arm. "Well, I hope it works out, dear." As she walked away, I saw her already whispering to the couple across the street. Derek was poisoning the well. Then came the legal threats. One afternoon, I came home from a grocery run to find a thick envelope taped to the door. Inside was a letter, stamped in red, "Notice of eviction, 30 days. My hand started shaking until I noticed something off. The county seal was crooked. The font looked like something from Microsoft Word. And the contact number was Derek's burner phone. I almost laughed. He'd actually printed out a fake eviction notice, but it wasn't funny. It was psychological warfare. I called Mr. Keller, who confirmed immediately, "It's fake, file it away. This will look very bad for them later." I put it in my growing evidence folder, carefully labeled. Around this time, I noticed small inconveniences starting to pile up. Mail went missing. Packages were delivered but never showed up. The Wi-Fi network kept getting reset to a different name. One time it was literally called DEREKSHOUSC. I'd find the thermostat mysteriously turned off in the middle of the night. Tools missing from the garage. Notes left on the fridge in Derek's handwriting. "This is temporary, just accept it." He wanted me to feel surrounded, outnumbered, trapped in my own home. Instead, he just made me angry. The emotional manipulation was worse. Mom started giving me the silent treatment, except for the occasional sharp remark. "You used to be so kind, Ainsley. What happened to you?" Dad would sigh deeply when I walked into a room like I was a storm cloud ruining his day. And Derek, he leaned fully into the villain role. One night at dinner, he casually said, "I talked to a lawyer today. He said if you keep refusing to cooperate, we can file for partition." I set down my fork slowly. "You don't have legal grounds for partition. You're not on the deed." He smirked. That yet sent a chill down my spine. I started hitting back. Quietly, strategically. The next morning, I printed out copies of the actual property deed and the forged transfer documents. I highlighted every legal discrepancy in bright yellow and left copies with Mr. Keller. Then, I called the county recorder's office to put a fraud alert on the property. Any attempt to file a lien, mortgage, or ownership change would immediately trigger a notification to both me and my lawyer. Derek didn't know I'd done it. A few days later, he tried filing something through a family friend at the bank. The county clerk flagged it and called Mr. Keller. I happened to be in the kitchen when Derek stormed in, slamming his phone on the counter. "What did you do?" he snapped. I looked up calmly from my laptop. "What do you mean? You blocked my filing?" "Oh," I said, sipping my coffee. "You mean the illegal filing? Yeah, that." He glared at me, fists clenched, but said nothing. For once, he was the one caught off guard. Things escalated fast after that. I received a call from the bank's collections department, not about my payments, but about Derek. Apparently, he had been trying to take out a bridge loan against the house without my knowledge. They asked if I wanted to approve it as the property owner. I said no. Then I asked for copies of every communication they'd had with Derek. At first, they refused, citing privacy. But when I mentioned fraud and legal counsel, they transferred me to the bank's fraud division. By the end of the call, they promised to send me everything they had on file. That's when I realized Derek wasn't just scheming within the family, he had outside help. Meanwhile, my lawyer and I began strategizing. "Ainsley," Mr. Keller said during one of our meetings, "they're counting on you to either give up or explode emotionally. You've done neither, that's good. Now we start tightening the noose." "How?" I asked. "We document every fraudulent act. We flag every filing. We let them dig themselves into a legal grave, and when the time comes, we hit them with everything at once." It was cold, methodical, but it made sense. Emotionally, though, it wasn't easy. Every night I went to bed feeling like I was sleeping in enemy territory. Derek's footsteps in the hallway made my skin crawl. Mom's silence stung more than any insult. Dad's avoidance felt like betrayal disguised as neutrality. I started journaling again. Every night I wrote down not just what happened, but how it made me feel. Not for evidence for me, I needed to remember why I was fighting. Because on bad days, it was tempting to just walk away. Sell the house, cut ties, disappear. But then I'd think of Grandma. Of the rose bushes, the summers in this house, the warmth she left behind. This was more than a property dispute. This was my line in the sand. The breaking point came one Friday evening. Derek had some friends over, loud, obnoxious guys who drank beer on the porch and made jokes about kicking the landlord out. I walked outside and told them to leave. One of them laughed in my face. "Derek said you're just squatting. He's the real owner." Something inside me snapped. I pulled out my phone, hit record, and said loudly, "Derek Morrison is lying. I'm the legal owner. He forged documents and is under investigation for fraud. You're trespassing. Leave now." The laughter died. They looked at Derek. He froze, caught completely off guard. "Turn that off," he growled. "No," I said. "This is going in my records." They left a few minutes later, awkward and quiet. And for the first time, Derek didn't have a comeback. The weekend after Derek's little eviction notice stunt, I received a thick envelope from the bank's fraud division. Inside was a stack of printed emails, loan applications, and internal memos, everything they'd had on file involving Derek, my parents, and the property. I sat at the dining table with a cup of coffee, spreading the papers out like puzzle pieces. The first few were what I expected. Fake management authorizations, loan applications signed under Derek's name, my forged signature here and there. But then I hit something weird. Several internal emails between Derek and a bank employee named Brad Henderson. Brad wasn't a loan officer, he worked in mortgage compliance, and the tone of the emails wasn't exactly professional. "Don't worry, bro, we can make this work. Paperwork's just paperwork. Once we push this through, she can't stop it, trust me. I'll flag the alerts so they don't slow us down." My stomach tightened. Brad Henderson wasn't just helping Derek. He was bypassing internal safeguards to push through fraudulent loans. I called Mr. Keller immediately. He sounded impressed, almost alarmingly so. "This is big, Ainsley. If what you're showing me is accurate, this isn't just a family fraud issue anymore. This is criminal bank fraud, federal territory." I scanned and emailed him the documents. "Ainsley," he said after a pause, "this is going to change everything, but you have to be careful. If you confront Derek now, he'll cover his tracks." "We need more, right?" I stared at the pile of evidence, the fluorescent kitchen light buzzing overhead. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore, this was conspiracy. I started digging into Brad Henderson. LinkedIn, mortgage compliance officer at Everline Bank for 6 years, went to high school in the same county as us. Facebook, friends with Derek going back years, tagged in old party photos together. That was the connection. Derek had a man on the inside. I dug deeper. Using a FOIA request and some creative searching through the county recorder's public database, I found that 2 of the fraudulent loans had been approved unusually fast, less than 48 hours. Normally, those loans take weeks. The approval signatures, Brad Henderson. Meanwhile, Derek's behavior started shifting. He wasn't cocky anymore, he was tense. short-tempered, snapping at Mom, avoiding me entirely. One night I caught him in the study, frantically shredding papers. "What are you doing?" I asked. He jumped like he'd been caught committing a crime, which technically he had. "Cleaning up," he muttered, shoving the last sheet into the shredder. I pulled out my phone and started recording. "Funny time for cleaning," he glared at me. "You're paranoid." "No," I said, "I'm thorough." I uploaded the video to my evidence folder that night. A few days later, the bank called me again. This time, it wasn't the fraud division. It was Brad Henderson himself. "Hi, Ms. Morrison," he said, too casually. "I just wanted to touch base about some upcoming adjustments to your property file." I could almost hear him smirking through the phone. "What adjustments?" I asked, pretending not to know who he was. "Oh, nothing to worry about, just some internal paperwork Derek submitted. I'll take care of it on our end, it's routine." I let him talk. Every word was like a confession. "Actually," I said sweetly, "can you send me copies of those forms for my lawyer?" Silence. Then a forced laugh. "Oh, no need for lawyers, it's just procedural." "I insist," I said. "Email's fine." He hung up a few seconds later. That call rattled me. It was one thing to fight my family, that was personal. But this was a system rigged against me. Derek had someone inside the bank actively helping him bypass checks and push fraudulent documents. If I hadn't found the emails, they might have transferred ownership before I even knew. I called Mr. Keller again that night. "This is exactly what we needed," he said. "A third-party accomplice. If we can prove Henderson knowingly facilitated the fraud, we can dismantle Derek's entire legal position and drag the bank into this." "How?" I asked. "Whistleblower route," he replied. "You file a formal fraud complaint with the OCC and the state attorney general. That forces the bank to investigate from the top down. Henderson will panic, and when he panics, he'll make mistakes." It sounded terrifying, but also brilliant. Before filing, I wanted more. I remembered the hidden camera I'd set up in the study weeks ago. I pulled the footage from the last few nights, and there it was. Derek, late at night, pulling up his laptop, opening a Zoom call, on the other end, Brad Henderson. Their conversation was quiet but clear enough. "Derek, she's on to us." "Brad, relax. As long as the docs are processed, she can't stop it. Just keep her distracted." "Derek, she called the fraud division." "Brad, shit." "Okay, we'll reroute through my supervisor's credentials, she'll never know." I paused the video, hands shaking. "Gotcha. I met Mr. Keller in person the next day. We sat in his office, the blinds drawn. He watched the video twice, then leaned back slowly. "This is our smoking gun," he said. "Twist number 1. Derek didn't just forge papers, he colluded with a bank official to bypass the system. This is felony-level stuff, Ainsley." I felt a strange mix of fear and triumph. For weeks, they'd made me feel like the powerless one, like the lone voice against family. Now I had proof that the real criminals weren't me. They were sitting in my living room every night, eating my food, and one of them worked for a bank. Filing the complaint felt terrifying. I sat at my desk late at night, the glow of my laptop the only light in the house. The OCC fraud reporting portal was open in one tab, the state attorney general's website in another. Every form asked for specifics, names, dates, documents, evidence. I uploaded everything, the forged documents, the internal emails, the hidden camera footage of Derek's late-night Zoom calls with Brad Henderson, even a transcript of my phone conversation with him, word for word. My hands shook as I hit submit. In that moment, the fight shifted. This was no longer a private family war. This was official. The next morning, Derek sensed something was different. He was pacing the kitchen, phone pressed to his ear. "What do you mean she filed a complaint? How do you even know that?" he hissed. I leaned casually against the doorway, coffee in hand. "Morning." He froze, then hung up abruptly. "What did you do?" I took a slow sip. "I told the truth to the right people." His face turned a shade of red I'd never seen before. "You're insane. Do you know what you've done?" "Yes," I said. "I've made it a lot harder for you to commit felonies." He slammed his hand against the counter. "This isn't over." "No," I said calmly. "It's just starting." 2 days later, Brad Henderson cracked. I got an unexpected call from a woman in Everline Bank's legal department. Her voice was crisp, professional, but there was tension underneath. "Ms. Morrison, this is Jennifer Lee, Senior Counsel at Everline Bank. We received your complaint through the OCC and the Attorney General's office. We'd like to schedule a meeting regarding Mr. Henderson's involvement in your property's account." Translation: they were panicking. "Of course," I said, hiding the grin in my voice. The meeting was held over video. Jennifer Lee sat in a sleek conference room with 2 other lawyers beside her. Brad Henderson wasn't there. "We've opened an internal investigation," Jennifer said. Mr. Henderson has been placed on administrative leave pending review. We'd appreciate your cooperation and any additional evidence you can provide. I shared everything again, this time with a calm I didn't know I was capable of. When I played the Zoom recording of Brad saying, "We'll reroute through my supervisor's credentials," one of the lawyers actually cursed under their breath. Jennifer's expression didn't change, but the subtle tightening of her jaw told me everything I needed to know. They were in damage control mode, and Derek's inside man was officially gone. The fallout at home was immediate. Derek came storming into the living room that evening. "What the hell did you do?" he shouted. "Brad, suspended. They're investigating. You just blew everything up." I closed my laptop slowly. "No, you blew everything up when you committed fraud. I just lit the match under your lies." Mom rushed in, panicked. "Ainsley, what's going on? Derek says you got his friend fired." "His accomplice," I corrected. "And yes, I did, because he was helping Derek steal my house." Mom shook her head like she couldn't process it. "You're tearing this family apart." That old line again, I almost laughed. "No, the truth is." Derek's voice dropped low, venomous. "You think you've won, you have no idea what's coming." I met his gaze without blinking. "Try me." For the first time, Mom and Dad saw Derek's mask slip. He wasn't the charming fixer anymore. He was furious, cornered, and starting to unravel. That night, I overheard Mom and Dad arguing in their bedroom. "She's not wrong, you know," Dad whispered. "She's destroying us," Mom hissed back. "No, Derek did this. He forged those papers. He dragged us into this mess. We're lucky she found it when she did." I stood outside their door, heart pounding. It was the first time Dad had taken my side. Even if he didn't say it to me directly, it mattered. Mom's silence after his words was long. Heavy. A few days later, I got a letter from the OCC acknowledging my complaint. They were launching a joint investigation with state authorities. Brad Henderson was officially under investigation for mortgage fraud, conspiracy, and falsification of documents. The bank offered to cooperate fully with me and my lawyer to resolve the ownership dispute. Derek's power base was crumbling. Without Brad, he didn't have a way to push filings through quietly. Without the bank backing him, his narrative of being the responsible one was falling apart. One night, Derek cornered me in the hallway. He didn't yell this time, he didn't smirk, he looked scared. "You've ruined everything," he whispered. "No," I said quietly, "you did that yourself." His eyes searched mine, maybe hoping for a crack of sympathy. There was none. "I'm not going to jail for this," he said. "Then maybe you should have thought of that before committing fraud," I replied. He walked away without another word. Mom stopped talking to me altogether. She avoided eye contact, avoided rooms I was in. Dad, on the other hand, started lingering, asking quiet questions, not openly taking sides, but watching. I could see the realization dawning on him. Derek wasn't the hero he thought. This was the beginning of the fracture. The three of them had been united in their greed and desperation. But with Brad gone, the pressure from the bank mounting, and investigations underway, cracks were forming. And I intended to widen them. Before going to bed one night, I sat at Grandma's old desk, flipping through my notes. Evidence, dates, statements, legal filings. This had started as me defending a house. Now it was about exposing a rot that had been festering for years inside my family and beyond. I whispered to myself, "You picked the wrong person to underestimate." The days after Brad's suspension were some of the strangest I'd ever lived through. The house felt off. Quieter, heavier. Derek no longer strutted around like a king. Instead, he stalked through the rooms like a cornered animal. I could see it in his eyes, that frantic calculation, the desperation of someone who realizes the walls are closing in. And then he did what desperate people always do. He started a smear campaign. It began online. One of my coworkers texted me late one night, "Hey, is everything okay? Saw something weird on Facebook." I logged on to see a long, emotional post from Derek. Breaks my heart to see my own sister turning against our family. While Mom and Dad struggled to keep the house afloat, she swooped in with lawyers and threats. She's trying to take the only thing keeping us together. Some people care more about property than family. Hundreds of likes, dozens of sympathetic comments from old family friends and neighbors. "That's awful, Derek. She's always been the cold one. Families should stick together, not sue each other." My hands were shaking as I scrolled. He'd rewritten the entire story. Turned himself into the martyr, me into the villain. Classic Derek. Then came the whispered conversations with neighbors. I'd walk to get the mail and feel eyes on me. The couple across the street stopped inviting me to their bonfires. People I'd grown up with suddenly had tight smiles and quick excuses to leave. The betrayal stung, but it also hardened me. If they wanted to turn this into a PR war, I wasn't playing defense. I recorded a short video. Nothing dramatic, just me sitting at Grandma's old kitchen table. I spoke calmly, clearly. I've seen a lot of rumors online. Here's the truth. My grandmother left this house to me. My brother forged my signature, took out loans without my consent, and colluded with a bank employee to commit fraud. The case is under federal investigation. I love my family, but I will not let anyone take what's rightfully mine through lies. Not even them. I posted it to my private page. Within hours, it spread. Friends from college, old coworkers, even a few neighbors shared it. The tide didn't turn completely, but the narrative cracked. People started asking Derek hard questions in his comments. His replies grew defensive, then angry. Inside the house, the tension reached a new high. One night, I found Mom crying at the kitchen table, a crumpled printout of Derek's Facebook post in her hands. "You made this public," she said through tears. "No, he did," I replied softly. "He dragged our fight online. I just told the truth." She looked at me like she didn't recognize me anymore. "You've changed, Ainsley." I almost laughed. "No, I've just stopped letting you rewrite the story." She turned away. Dad walked in a moment later. He picked up the paper silently, read it, then set it down. "This is getting out of hand," he muttered. "Then stop enabling him," I said. He didn't reply, but he didn't defend Derek either. The next escalation came when Derek tried to weaponize the law again. He served me with a cease and desist letter through a cheap local attorney. It accused me of defamation and interference with family affairs, demanding that I take down my video and publicly retract all statements. Mr. Keller laughed out loud when I showed it to him. "This isn't worth the paper it's printed on." Empty threat. "We'll respond formally and shut it down." We did. And Derek's bluff folded within 48 hours, but he wasn't done. He started pulling Mom and Dad aside for long, whispered conversations. Doors closed, voices low. I'd walk by the living room and hear fragments. "She doesn't care about us. If we unite, we can push her out. She's making it worse for everyone." Classic divide and conquer. Mom grew colder toward me, repeating Derek's talking points like a script. Dad remained quiet, but I could tell he was conflicted. One evening, I overheard Derek snapping at them in frustration. "Why are you hesitating? She's winning because you're weak." His words hit them hard. Mom gasped. Dad told him to lower his voice. For the first time, Derek sounded less like the heroic son and more like the manipulative bully he was. Meanwhile, I started noticing small signs of support. Neighbors who had once looked at me with suspicion started giving me nods, small smiles. One older man even slipped a note into my mailbox. "We've heard the real story. Stay strong." At work, colleagues sent messages like, "Good for you for standing up for yourself. Family doesn't mean surrender." It wasn't a tidal wave of support, but it was enough to remind me I wasn't completely alone. Derek, sensing his grip slipping, decided to go nuclear. He brought in a lawyer of his own, not a family friend this time, but a flashy real estate attorney from the city. The man showed up in a suit too expensive for our sleepy town, carrying a briefcase that looked like it belonged in a courtroom drama. He handed me a letter demanding mediation, threatening to pursue legal remedies to reclaim shared family property. Mr. Keller read it, sighed, and said, "They're trying to scare you. They have no legal standing, but this does mean we're entering the formal battle phase." And honestly, I was ready. That night, Derek confronted me in the hallway. "Do you even care what you're doing to this family?" he asked, voice low but intense. I looked him dead in the eye. "Do you?" He flinched just a little. For the first time since this started, I saw something flicker in his eyes, not arrogance, not anger, something like fear, because he could feel it too. The tide was turning. I went to bed that night with my evidence locked up, my lawyer looped in, and a plan forming. They'd underestimated me from the start, but this wasn't about proving them wrong anymore. This was about taking back control of my life, and I wasn't even close to finished. The letter came in a plain white envelope with no return address. I almost tossed it in the pile of junk mail on the counter, but something about the handwriting, looping, elegant, vaguely familiar, made me pause. Inside was a single sheet of paper and a small brass key. The note read, "Ainsley, if you're reading this, then I think it's time you know what your grandmother left behind. Go to the attic. Back wall." Small chest. M. My pulse quickened. There was only one M in Grandma's circle who wrote like that. Margaret Davis, Grandma's oldest friend. The attic smelled like cedar and dust. It hadn't changed since Grandma passed, boxes stacked neatly, old quilts, Christmas decorations, the faint scent of lavender sachets. I moved carefully toward the back wall, brushing cobwebs aside until I found it, a small wooden chest with brass fittings. The key fit perfectly. Inside, wrapped in layers of tissue paper, was a handwritten will. Grandma's handwriting, clear as day. Dated 3 months before the official will, my breath caught as I read. To my granddaughter Ainsley, I leave not only the house, but the right to decide its future. This home is to remain in her name alone. It is my hope that it will give her the stability and independence that others in this family have taken for granted. And then, a line that wasn't in the official will. If anyone attempts to dispute this letter is to be considered my final word. Attached was a notarized statement from Margaret as witness. This wasn't just sentiment, it was legally explosive. I called Mr. Keller immediately. He came over within the hour, his usual calm replaced by something close to excitement. "This changes everything," he said, carefully laying the document out on the dining table. "This isn't just a will, this is a codicil. If valid, it overrides the previous provisions. And look," he pointed to a section, "she explicitly foresaw disputes. This is gold." I stared at the faded ink, overwhelmed. "Why didn't anyone find this before?" He gave me a small smile. "Because you're the only one who cared enough to look in the attic." Before we could file it, I wanted to verify the witness signature, so I drove out to Margaret Davis's house the next morning. She lived on the edge of town in a tidy cottage, surrounded by rose bushes that rivaled Grandma's. She opened the door before I could knock twice. "Ainsley Morrison," she said, her eyes twinkling despite her age. "I was wondering when you'd find that." "You sent me the letter?" She nodded. "I held onto that copy for years. Your grandmother trusted me to make sure it reached you when you needed it most." My throat tightened. "Why didn't you come sooner?" She looked at me sadly. "Because I hoped your family would do right by you, but it's clear now they haven't." We sat at her kitchen table as she poured tea. The sun streamed through lace curtains, making the moment feel both intimate and monumental. She pulled out a folder of her own notarized statements, photographs of the original signing, even a video clip on an old camcorder of Grandma reading her will aloud to Margaret. "She knew there would be trouble," Margaret said. "She told me, they'll try to take it from her. Make sure she has this when the time comes." Tears blurred my vision. I hadn't cried in months, not since this war began, but hearing that it broke something open. Grandma had known, she had prepared for this. She believed in me. Margaret surprised me again before I left. "You're not fighting alone anymore," she said firmly. "Your grandmother's lawyer, Mr. Willoughby, is still alive. He's retired now, but he remembers everything. I can put you in touch." A retired lawyer who handled Grandma's estate? That was exactly the kind of ally I needed. Later that evening, back at the house, I carefully placed the handwritten will in a fireproof safe. Derek didn't know yet. Neither did Mom and Dad. For the first time in weeks, I felt like I had the upper hand. Of course, Derek couldn't sense that without sniffing around. I caught him later in the hallway, trying to casually peer into my room. "What's in the safe?" he asked, trying to sound innocent. "None of your business," I replied flatly. He smirked. "Keeping secrets, little sister?" "No," I said, "protecting the truth." The smirk faltered. The next day, Mr. Keller arranged a meeting with Mr. Willoughby. The old man was frail but sharp. He remembered Grandma vividly. "She insisted on that codicil," he told us, voice gravelly but steady. "Said she didn't trust her son and daughter-in-law to respect Ainsley's rights. Smart woman." He signed an affidavit verifying the authenticity of the handwritten will and offered to testify if necessary. "This will blow their case to pieces," Keller whispered to me as we left, and I believed him. Back at home, Derek was ramping up his desperation. He'd noticed Dad spending more time with me, small conversations, quiet questions about the case. Mom was still firmly in his corner, but cracks were forming. At dinner, Derek tried to bait me. "You know," he said casually, "even if you think you've got something, courts don't like family disputes. Judges just want quick settlements." I raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like someone's nervous." He forced a laugh. "I'm just saying don't get cocky," I smiled thinly. "I'm not cocky, I'm prepared." And for the first time, he didn't have a comeback. That night, alone in my room, I pulled the handwritten will out one last time. I traced Grandma's handwriting with my fingers. She had trusted me to protect what mattered, not just the house, but her legacy. And now, with Margaret and Mr. Willoughby on my side, for the first time, I truly believed I could win this. Filing the codicil felt like setting off a controlled explosion. Mr. Keller and I went to the county courthouse early in the morning. I handed the handwritten will, Margaret's notarized statements, and Mr. Willoughby's affidavit to the clerk. She stamped each page meticulously, then looked up at me. "This will override any competing claims if validated," she said. "You may want to prepare for pushback." "I already have," I replied. The legal wheels started turning faster than I expected. Within a week, Derek's lawyer filed a motion demanding disclosure of any newly discovered documents related to the estate. Mr. Keller responded with a calm, lethal precision, attaching the codicil and affidavits. He copied Derek's lawyer, Derek, and, for good measure, the bank's legal team. Reaction came within hours. Derek burst through the front door that evening, face pale with fury. "What the hell is this?" he shouted, waving a printout of the codicil like it was a personal betrayal. I stayed seated at the kitchen table, calm. "It's Grandma's actual final will, the one she didn't trust you with. You hid this from me." "No," I said. "I found it, you just never looked." His hands trembled. "You think this changes anything? You think some dusty letter is going to stop me?" "It's not a letter," I said. "It's legally binding, and it spells out exactly what Grandma wanted. This house is mine and you have no claim." For a moment he looked like he might actually hit something. Mom stepped in between us, frantic. "Stop this, both of you," she cried, but Derek wasn't hearing anyone. He stormed off, slamming his door so hard the walls shook. Later that night, I overheard him in the backyard, phone pressed to his ear. "We have to fight it. I don't care what it takes. There's got to be some loophole. She can't just win like this." His voice cracked at the end, not with anger, but fear. It struck me then, Derek wasn't just fighting for power. He was fighting because he'd built his whole identity around being the savior, the heir, the one in control. And now, with one piece of paper, that illusion was collapsing. The family dinner that followed was the breaking point. We hadn't sat down together in weeks, but Mom insisted, for appearances, she said. The atmosphere was toxic from the start. Derek stabbed at his food in silence. Dad looked between us like a referee who'd lost control of the match. Mom plastered on a fake smile, pretending everything was normal. Halfway through, Derek threw down his fork. "Congratulations," he said bitterly. "You found your magic paper. Must feel good, huh? Crushing your family to win?" I set my napkin down. "This isn't about crushing anyone. It's about honoring Grandma's wishes and protecting what's mine." "Yours," he spat. "Always yours. You were the favorite. She gave you everything. And what did you do? You left. You didn't lift a finger to help when things got hard." "That's not true," I snapped. "I was working my ass off to support myself because I didn't expect handouts. You were the one living here, taking advantage, forging signatures. Don't you dare?" "Enough." Dad's voice cut through like a whip. The room went silent. He looked at Derek first. "I've been quiet too long. You lied. You stole and you dragged this family into a mess that could ruin all of us." Derek's face crumpled just for a second. "I did it for us." Dad shook his head slowly. "No, you did it for yourself." Then he turned to Mom. "And you let it happen." Mom looked like she'd been slapped. "I was trying to keep the peace. You kept his peace," he said quietly. For the first time, the three of them weren't united. After dinner, Dad knocked on my door. "I read the codicil," he said softly. "I remember when your mother and I first moved into this house. Your grandmother told us she'd never let it leave your hands. I didn't believe her back then. I guess I should have." His eyes were tired, but clearer than I'd seen in months. "I can't undo what's happened," he said, "but I can stop pretending Derek's right." It wasn't an apology exactly, but it was something. The next day, Derek's lawyer filed an emergency motion claiming the codicil was invalid due to lack of timely disclosure and possible undue influence. Mr. Keller handled it with surgical efficiency, attaching the video of Grandma reading the codicil aloud to Margaret and the notarized documents. "They're grasping at straws," he told me. "This is their last real shot to undermine you before trial." And Derek knew it too. I caught him in the hallway that night, eyes bloodshot. "You think this is over?" he whispered. "I'll fight you to the end." I met his gaze steadily. "Then I guess I'll see you in court." Meanwhile, Margaret became more involved. She testified in an official deposition, confirming everything about the codicil's creation. Mr. Willoughby backed it up with legal precedent. For the first time, it wasn't just me versus them. It was me, with Grandma's words, legal allies, and truth against their crumbling lies. Mom stayed in denial. She hovered around Derek like a shield, repeating, "Families don't sue each other," like a prayer. But the foundation under her was cracking. Dad began spending more time with me, reviewing documents, asking questions, even offering to testify if needed. And Derek, he became unpredictable. One moment calm, the next snapping. His lawyer started calling constantly, his confidence faltering. The codicil had tilted the board, and he knew he was losing. The courthouse conference room was colder than I expected. A row of fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting a sterile glow on the polished table where we sat, me on one side with Mr. Keller, Derek and his flashy city attorney on the other. Mom sat beside him, lips pressed tight, refusing to look at me. Dad sat behind me, silent but present. This was the pre-trial deposition, the stage where everything hidden comes to light. Mr. Keller leaned over and whispered, "This is where we let them talk themselves into a corner." I nodded, gripping my pen a little tighter. Derek's lawyer went first. His voice was smooth, rehearsed, like he thought he was the smartest man in the room. "Ms. Morrison," he began, "would you say that your relationship with your family has been strained in recent years?" I smiled politely. "It's strained now, yes, because my brother committed fraud." A small ripple of discomfort went through the room. He tried again, "But prior to that, you'd been living out of state. You weren't involved in the upkeep of the family home, were you?" "I wasn't living here," I said evenly, "but I sent money to help with property taxes and repairs. I have bank statements to prove it." He glanced at Derek, who shifted in his seat. Mr. Keller slid a folder across the table. "Exhibit 3, he said calmly. "Wire transfers from Ms. Morrison to her parents, totaling $22,400 over 5 years. The opposing lawyer's mouth tightened. Then it was Derek's turn to answer questions. Mr. Keller's tone was deceptively gentle, like a man setting out mousetraps. "Mr. Morrison," he began, "can you explain how you came to sign loan documents against the house when you were not on the deed?" Derek straightened his suit jacket. "I was acting as a family representative." "We all agreed." "Who agreed?" Keller interrupted softly. "My parents and I. Did Ainsley agree?" Derek hesitated. "She wasn't around." "So that's a no," his lawyer objected, but Keller pressed on. "Did you have legal power of attorney for your sister?" "No." "Did you forge her signature?" "I know, it was authorized." "By who?" Silence. Keller raised an eyebrow. "Mr. Morrison, are you aware that the bank has turned over internal emails between you and Brad Henderson detailing your plan to reroute through supervisor credentials?" Derek's face went white. His lawyer objected furiously, but the damage was done. Mom's deposition was next. Her answers were clipped, defensive. "I just wanted the family to stay together," she repeated over and over, as if saying it enough times would erase the facts. When Keller gently pointed out that she'd co-signed at least one of Derek's fraudulent loans, she snapped. "He told me it was temporary." Keller nodded calmly. "And you didn't think to ask your daughter, the legal owner, for permission?" She looked away. "I trusted my son." Dad's testimony, though, changed the energy in the room. When Derek's lawyer asked him if he supported Derek's actions, Dad sighed deeply. "I supported my son," he said slowly, "but I don't support what he did." Mom's head snapped toward him, Derek's jaw clenched. Dad continued, voice steady. "I should have spoken up sooner. Ainsley is the rightful owner. What Derek did was wrong." It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic, but it landed like a thunderclap. After the depositions, Derek cornered me outside the courthouse. "You turned Dad against me," he hissed. "No," I said calmly. "You did that yourself." He stepped closer. "You think you're so righteous, just wait, you'll regret this." I didn't flinch. "No, Derek, for once, you will." Over the following weeks, both sides filed motions. Derek's lawyer tried everything, contesting the codicil's validity, claiming undue influence, even suggesting Margaret manipulated Grandma. Keller responded with affidavits, video evidence, notarized statements, and decades of case law. Each time they struck, he countered like a surgeon with a scalpel. And behind the scenes, the OCC investigation into Brad Henderson deepened. He'd lawyered up, and rumors were swirling that he was negotiating a plea deal, one that involved naming Derek as a co-conspirator. The closer we got to trial, the more unhinged Derek became. He showed up at the house one night, pounding on my door. "You're destroying this family," he shouted from the porch. "For what? A pile of bricks and wood?" I opened the door slowly. "No, for the truth." "You think Grandma loved you more," he sneered. "That's why she gave you the house." I looked him straight in the eye. "No, Derek, she trusted me more." His face twisted with something between pain and rage. For a second, I almost saw the brother I'd grown up with. But then he turned away, storming into the night. As the trial date approached, the town buzzed with gossip. Some people sided with Derek out of habit, but more and more were starting to see the cracks. The bank investigation leaked to local papers, and suddenly Derek wasn't the sacrificing son anymore. He was the man who colluded with a banker to defraud his sister. Mom stayed by his side, but her eyes were haunted. Dad stood with me quietly, helping where he could. Margaret and Mr. Willoughby were ready to testify. Keller was building a case so airtight even Derek's slippery lawyer was starting to look uneasy. And me? For the first time since this started, I wasn't just surviving. I was winning. The courthouse was packed the morning of the trial. Neighbors, family friends, even a couple of old teachers from high school were there. The story had spread beyond our little town. Local reporters had picked it up after the OCC investigation into Brad Henderson leaked. They called it the Morrison House case. I stood outside the courtroom with Mr. Keller, adjusting the sleeves of my blazer. My heart was pounding, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was focus. This was it. Inside, the judge, a stern woman with steel gray hair and sharp eyes, called the court to order. Derek sat across from me with his lawyer, pale but defiant. Mom was beside him, clutching a handkerchief. Dad sat behind me again, his quiet presence grounding me. The bank had their own legal team present, trying to minimize the damage. Brad Henderson wasn't there, he'd flipped. Word had spread that he was cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for leniency. And Derek. He was about to face everything head-on. The bank's representative testified first, confirming the fraudulent loans, the internal emails, and Brad's involvement. When Keller played the hidden camera footage of Derek and Brad discussing how to reroute through supervisor credentials, the courtroom went dead silent. Derek's lawyer objected weakly. The judge overruled. Then came Margaret. She walked slowly to the stand, but her voice was steady as she recounted Grandma's final wishes, the codicil signing, and the warning Grandma had given her years ago. She said they'd try to take it from her, Margaret said, looking directly at Derek. And she was right. The codicil and video recording were entered into evidence. Derek's lawyer tried to challenge authenticity, but between the notary, Mr. Willoughby's affidavit, and decades-old legal precedent, their argument crumbled fast. When Derek took the stand, the room held its breath. His lawyer tried to keep things controlled, guiding him with rehearsed questions. Why did you sign the loan documents? I thought I was helping my family. Did you ever intend to defraud your sister? No, never. She abandoned the family. Someone had to step up. Then Keller stood. His voice was calm, but his questions cut like a scalpel. You didn't have power of attorney, correct? No. You forged your sister's signature, correct? I used a template she'd signed before? So yes, you forged it. Objection, overruled. You colluded with Brad Henderson to bypass internal bank safeguards. Is that true? I didn't. Keller held up printed emails. Shall I read them aloud? Derek swallowed. No. The judge leaned forward. Answer the question, Mr. Morrison. His voice broke. Yes. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Mom covered her mouth. Dad closed his eyes. I just sat still, watching the facade crumble. Then Keller delivered the final blow. Isn't it true, Mr. Morrison, that you told Mr. Henderson, and I quote, once we push this through, she can't stop it, trust me? Derek stared at the floor. Yes. Thank you, no further questions. When Derek stepped down, he looked hollow, like the weight of his lies had finally crushed him. Mom took the stand briefly. She tried to paint it all as family misunderstanding, but under cross-examination, she admitted she'd signed at least one document she didn't understand. The judge wasn't impressed. This is not a misunderstanding, Mrs. Morrison, she said firmly. This is fraud. Mom broke down in tears. Finally, it was my turn. Keller guided me through my testimony. I explained how I found the overdue letters, the hidden emails, the attic chest. I spoke about Grandma's trust, about what this house meant to me. Then Derek's lawyer tried to rattle me. Ms. Morrison, isn't it true that you don't even live in this house full-time? I live here now, I said. And more importantly, I've honored this house. I didn't try to steal it. Do you love your brother? The question caught me off guard. I paused. I loved the brother I thought I had. But that person made choices that hurt me, our family, and Grandma's legacy. Love doesn't excuse betrayal. The courtroom was silent. Closing arguments were swift. Derek's lawyer tried to frame it as a family dispute gone too far, begging the court for leniency. Keller stood and laid out the facts like dominoes: forgery, collusion, federal fraud investigation, legally binding codicil, witnesses, affidavits, video evidence. This isn't just a sibling rivalry, he said. This is a case of a woman standing up against calculated deception, even when that deception came from inside her own family. The judge recessed for 40 minutes. I waited outside, pacing the hallway, feeling every second stretch like an hour. Then the bailiff called us back in. Everyone stood as the judge returned. She flipped through her notes, then looked directly at Derek. Mr. Morrison, she said, voice firm, your actions constitute fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Civilly, you have no legal claim to this property. Criminal matters will proceed separately under state and federal law. She turned to me. Ms. Morrison, the court recognizes you as the sole legal owner of the Morrison property, as per the codicil and the original will. Judgment is entered fully in your favor. The gavel struck. It was done. The sound of the gavel echoed in my chest like a heartbeat. Derek slumped in his chair, pale. His lawyer whispered furiously, but he didn't respond. Mom sobbed quietly. Dad placed a hand on my shoulder, not a grand gesture, just steady. Reporters swarmed as we left, but I barely heard them. I stepped outside into the autumn air, closing my eyes as the weight lifted. For the first time in years, I felt free. This house wasn't just a building anymore. It was justice. The morning after the trial, the house was silent. No more shouting in the hallways. No more slammed doors or fake eviction notices. Just sunlight streaming through Grandma's old curtains, dust motes floating in the air, and a kind of quiet I hadn't felt in months. I stood in the living room barefoot, coffee in hand, staring at the rose garden through the window. For the first time, the house didn't feel like a battlefield. It felt like home again. Derek didn't come back to the house after the verdict. His lawyer escorted him out of the courthouse, and from what Keller told me, federal investigators were preparing formal charges related to the forged loans. It wasn't about revenge anymore. Watching him in court, pale, defeated, stripped of all his bluster, I realized something. He'd built his entire identity on control, on being the savior. When that illusion cracked, there was nothing underneath. Part of me mourned that. Most of me didn't. Mom refused to speak to me for days. She stayed with a friend across town, telling anyone who asked that she needed space. She didn't call, didn't text, didn't even send one of her passive-aggressive emails. I think in her mind, I'd betrayed the family by taking the fight public. By winning, she didn't see the years of quiet betrayal that led us here, only the final explosion. And maybe she wasn't ready to face her part in it yet. Dad was different. The night after the verdict, he knocked on my bedroom door. He looked older than I remembered, like the months of silence had finally caught up to him. "I should have stood up sooner," he said quietly. I didn't know what to say. He continued, "I thought I was keeping the peace, but I was just letting things rot. You were right to fight, and I'm proud of you." The words hit me harder than I expected. "Thank you," I whispered. It wasn't a full reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. The bank called a few days later. Their tone was polite now, almost deferential. They wanted to schedule meetings to resolve the outstanding loan balances tied to Derek's fraud. Keller handled most of it, but I sat in on the calls. It felt surreal hearing the same institution that once ignored my concerns now treating me like the sole authority. Because I was. The fraudulent loans would be voided. The house title was officially cleared in my name. The legal storm was finally passing. That weekend, I did something I hadn't done in over a year. I invited a few friends over for dinner. Not to make a statement, not to prove anything, just to fill the house with laughter again. We ate in the backyard under the string lights Grandma had hung years ago. The rose bushes were blooming late this season, as if they'd been waiting for peace too. One of my friends raised her glass. To Ainsley, for not letting the bastards win. I laughed, embarrassed, but also proud. For so long, I'd been on defense, surviving, enduring, now I was rebuilding. That night, I walked through each room slowly, barefoot, touching the walls, the banister, the kitchen counters. This house had witnessed betrayal, secrets, legal battles, but also resilience. Grandma's presence felt stronger than ever. I whispered into the quiet, "I did it, Grandma." And for the first time, the silence felt like an answer. 3 weeks after the verdict, the federal charges came down. It wasn't unexpected, but seeing Derek's name in the official press release still hit like a cold wave. Derek Morrison indicted on counts of mortgage fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit bank fraud in connection with the illegal use of family property as collateral. His mugshot was everywhere online, in the local paper, even flashed briefly on the evening news. He'd always loved attention, but not like this. I didn't go to the arraignment. Part of me thought I should to prove a point to stare him down, but the truth was I didn't need to anymore. He wasn't my opponent anymore. He was just another man facing the consequences of his own choices. Keller kept me updated. Derek pled not guilty, of course, but with Brad Henderson's cooperation and a mountain of paper trails, it was a losing battle. Honestly, Keller told me, his best option is a plea deal, and that's probably where this is heading. It was strange. For months, Derek had been the center of my world, the force I had to outthink, outmaneuver, survive. And now he was just a defendant. Mom finally came to see me. She showed up unannounced one afternoon, standing stiffly on the porch like she wasn't sure she was welcome. I opened the door slowly. "Can I come in?" she asked. Her voice was small. "Yeah," I said after a beat. She sat at the kitchen table, the same spot where so many of our fights had started. But this time, she looked deflated. "I thought I was protecting the family," she said quietly. I thought if I stood by Derek, we could keep things together. I didn't say anything. She stared down at her hands. I was wrong. The words hung in the air like something fragile and rare. I didn't want to believe he could do those things, she continued. And when you fought back, I told myself you were being selfish, but I see now, her voice cracked. You were the only one protecting us. For a moment, I saw the mother I used to know. Not the woman who chose denial over truth, but the one who taught me to speak up when something was wrong. I can't undo what I did, she whispered. No, I said softly, but you can stop pretending it didn't happen. She nodded, tears spilling down her cheeks. We talked for a long time. Not everything was forgiven, not everything could be, but it was the first honest conversation we'd had in years. When she left, she paused at the doorway. I hope one day you can forgive me, she said. I didn't promise her that, but I didn't shut the door either. A week later, the bank formally voided all of Derek's fraudulent loans. Keller handed me the official documents, the house title, clean and undisputed, back in my name alone. It felt surreal holding that paper. This wasn't just legal victory anymore. This was closure. That weekend, I made a decision. For months, the house had been my fortress, my battlefield, my proof. But it had also been a prison of sorts, every room carrying echoes of arguments, whispered schemes, late-night legal strategy sessions. I walked through the house slowly, touching the walls, the staircase, Grandma's old armchair. I wasn't going to sell it. That much I knew. But I also wasn't going to let it stay stuck in the past. I decided to renovate. Not the way Derek wanted, flashy contractors and profit-driven changes. No, I was going to restore it. Carefully, thoughtfully, room by room. Not for him, not for them, for me. The first step was simple. I repainted the front door. It sounds small, but watching that fresh coat of deep blue replace the chipped, faded paint felt like breathing new air into the house. Neighbors stopped by to compliment it. One even said, "It finally looks like your house again." And it did. As winter approached, the house grew quieter, not in a lonely way, but in a peaceful way. The garden went dormant, the roses curled in on themselves, waiting for spring. And for the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next blow. I was building something new. Spring came quietly. One morning, I stepped into the garden and saw the first rosebud pushing through, small, determined, defying the chill that still lingered in the air. It felt symbolic. The house had been stripped down to its bones and rebuilt piece by piece over the winter. The new kitchen tiles reflected the morning light. The attic had been cleaned, sealed, and turned into a reading nook. The courtroom transcripts and legal documents were boxed up and stored away. The war was over. And now, life was blooming again. Derek eventually took a plea deal. I found out through Keller, reduced sentence in exchange for full cooperation. He'd served time, but less than if he'd fought and lost. Part of me was relieved. Trials drag on. This way, the wounds wouldn't be reopened again and again. I didn't visit him. He didn't ask me to. Some endings don't need face-to-face goodbyes. Mom started coming by on weekends. Not every weekend, but enough. She brought groceries, helped plant flowers, sometimes just sat quietly in the kitchen with tea. The first few visits were awkward, but over time, something shifted. She stopped trying to rewrite the past, stopped pretending Derek had been misunderstood. She started asking questions instead of defending. We didn't rebuild overnight, but the foundation was there. Dad, on the other hand, became a fixture in the house again, fixing loose floorboards, trimming the hedges, telling me stories about Grandma I'd never heard before. One afternoon, we sat on the porch steps watching the sunset. "You know," he said quietly, "your grandmother would have been proud." I smiled. "I hope so." "She would," he said, "not just because you won, but because you didn't lose yourself while fighting." I didn't realize I was crying until he reached over and squeezed my hand. Life didn't suddenly become perfect. Some neighbors still avoided eye contact. Some old friends had drifted away during the mess. And there were nights when the weight of everything hit me all over again, the betrayals, the courtroom, the years I spent feeling like I didn't belong in my own home. But those moments passed more quickly now, because I wasn't stuck anymore. I had fought for this house, yes, but more than that, I'd fought for myself. For my right to stand up, to be heard, to not shrink away when the people closest to me tried to rewrite the truth. A few months later, I hosted a small gathering, just close friends, Margaret, Mr. Willoughby, Keller, and a few neighbors who'd stood by me. We gathered in the garden under string lights, just like that first dinner after the trial, but this time the air was warm and easy. Margaret raised a glass. "To Ainsley," she said, "for being exactly who your grandmother knew you were." Everyone cheered softly. I looked around at the faces, not all the same as before, but the right ones, and I felt whole. As the night wound down, I stood alone in the garden for a moment. The roses were in full bloom now, their scent thick in the air. I thought about Grandma, about the girl I used to be, quiet, accommodating, always stepping aside to keep the peace, and about the woman I'd become. I whispered into the night, I kept my promise. The wind moved gently through the garden, as if answering. People sometimes ask me if I regret taking my family to court. I tell them no, because sometimes justice isn't loud or glamorous. It's a long, painful, deeply personal act of standing up when no one expects you to. It's drawing a line and saying, no more lies, no more silence. It's reclaiming not just what's yours, but who you are. And I did. This house stands as proof. But more importantly, so do I.